Hello and welcome to the AppSense Environment Manager Masterclass series. This is a video number 2 and this is configuring the AppSense servers. So in the previous masterclass we talked about the environment for a demo proof of concept system and about how to obtain the AppSense software and how to install the software. Next is to configure the AppSense servers, and before we go to that stage it's always recommended that you test your environment, because if your network communications, your internet information services, your SQL servers are not communicating with each other, then obviously things will not go according to plan. So first off, on your domain controller or your AppSense server here, what I'm going to do is make sure that internet information services is running. So to do that, I'm just going to quite simply launch Internet Explorer, and we're going to go in with the full DNS name of our AppSense server. And hopefully we should see the internet information screen. And that's good and successful. So let's just close that down, and now I'm going to move across and log on to my Windows 7 machine, and we'll check here as well to make sure that everything is working fine here as well. So just waiting for that guy to come in, and while we're waiting for that, we'll also log on to the XP machine to make sure that this is going to all work as well. So here's our XP machine firing up, and we will also just make sure. So if we go to Internet Explorer, and all we're testing here is that our network connectivity is working. So we can see that in my XP machine is working quite happily there, so I know things are working. And it's always recommended to make sure that you switch off your firewall, especially when doing simple tests to build and install. It can be switched on later, you just need to remember to go and add in the exceptions that are needed. And let's go across to our Windows 7 machine. Let's just make sure everything's working in here. So again, we're going to do exactly the same test. So we'll just go and run iExplore and make sure we've got proper communications coming through. So Internet Explorer firing up, and I've actually set these up in my default mandatory profile, so they're all working successfully. Excellent. So we're ready now to configure the AppSense servers. To do this, remember from the previous masterclass, we have AppSense that has been installed in the following areas. Now you'll notice that each of these has a console. For example, the AppSense Management Center has a console, and we also have the server configuration utility. So we need to run the server configuration utility for the Management Center, for the Environment Manager, and also for the statistic control of Performance Manager. So we'll start with the Management Server. And if we run this, and this may take a few seconds, so we should get the splash screen with the version number on here and the AppSense Management Center. And this is what AppSense refer to as the SKU, the Software Configuration Utility. When you initially run it, it will run in a wizard mode. So we'll just follow through and hit next. And it's checking for what we call variances, or something that's not quite right with the system in terms of what it's expecting to see. So if we have a little scroll down, we can see that, for example, Windows Authentication Mode and ISP Restriction Module have got red crosses against them. Therefore, it's not quite what we're expecting to see, and this is all underneath the prerequisites. Now, we've taken a great deal of time with AppSense to actually go and help you fix these automatically. So these are what we call variances. So if I hit View, we can see that we have some variances here and some information as to what the causes might be. We have a nice little button down here called Repair All. And if we click Repair All, and hopefully within a few minutes, then we should get back to that. So I'm just going to pause the video and come back when that's done. Okay, that took about 30 seconds, and it's come back and said that it's managed to fix these issues for us. And generally we see that AppSense will actually fix about 90% of any variance issues that you get. And just to double check, we're going to hit the refresh, and no variances have appeared. Excellent. So we can hit close on that, And as we can look, we've now got green ticks across the board. Now we can hit next, and it's going to check the IIS settings. Again, we've already checked that previously, so hopefully this will come back with no problems. And we are now being prompted for which website would we like to use AppSense Management Server to connect to. And typically in a demo and proof of concept, you're going to be using the default website, so we'll just go ahead and click next. Next screen is asking about authentication. Now, as most people on a domain will be logging on with usernames and passwords associated to the domain and authenticated against the domain, then it's typical that we'll select domain Windows authentication. And as you can see, it says it's recommended. You can, however, if you wish, allow anonymous access. But these are people that will be connecting through to the Internet Information Server. So we're just going to click next on this one. The next screen now is the connection to the SQL database. And what we need to do with the SQL database is, number one, is create the SQL schema for the AppSense Management Server. And this is going to be done as the Windows account that you are currently logged on at the moment. Now I can choose between the two here, and I can use SQL authentication or Windows authentication. I installed my SQL server in Windows authentication mode. I am logged on as the domain administrator, app demo administrator, so I'm going to use this account to create the schema. And I need to put in my server name here, and my server name is appdemo-dc/SQL Express. I could use a drop-down browser here, but by default SQL Express and SQL installs have the SQL browser switched off by default. So I'm just putting in the full name there, and as you notice, because it's SQL Express, we have to put in /SQL Express. The database name for the management server by default will be management server. So we're just going to set the defaults and click next. The next screen is going to be the account that is going to be used on a day-to-day basis for all transactions to the SQL database. Now, what we would normally do and recommended to do is to create a service account, as you would do for quite a few other applications out there. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go into Active Directory, and we're going to create a service account and make it a member of domain admins. So I'm going to actually put it underneath my demo users, but you could put this wherever you wished inside your Active Directory. So I'm going to go and add in a new, we're going to add in a new user, and we're going to call it AppSense_service. AppSense_service. Next, and I'm going to give it a password. I'm going to switch these to never change and never expires. Can't change and expires. Hit finish on that. And obviously the last thing I need to do is add him to the group. I'm going to add him to the domain admins group and check the name, and done. Excellent. And we can close out of there. So now we can come in and use impersonated Windows authentication account, and we can browse for our newly created . And there we are. So this is the account that's going to be used on a day-to-day basis to allow us to access the SQL database via the servers. And we need to put in the password. And if at any time that you require to change the password for security reasons, then obviously you would need to go through into your Active Directory, change the password of the service account, and then rerun the AppSense Management Server configuration utility. And click next and accept. And what now will happen is that all of these details that you've inputted will be used to configure the Internet Information Server, apply the web pages to it, and then set up and apply the schemas and the permissions and the rights and the user account accessibilities into the SQL database. And effectively what's happening here is that the management server is being connected to the IIS and to the SQL database so that when you access the console you will have full access and be able to see the data. And as we can see now that my server has been configured correctly, I have no errors and I have a nice little finish button down at the bottom. So we'll just click finish on there. So next thing to do is to test that the AppSense Management Center is fully configured. So we'll go into Programs, AppSense, and I like to create a nice little shortcut on my desktop because I'm going to find I'm going to be using this quite a bit. So we'll just drag it and drop it onto the screen here, and we run this. And again, we get the AppSense Management Center splash screen with the version number, etc. on it, and we should get the connection screen. So from connection screen now, all we need to do is click to connect. And because we've accepted user authentication, we need to select our server, management server. This is our management server, which happens to be our same server, which is our domain controller, which is also our AppSense server. And as we were saying, because we're using Windows authentication mode, this is the person I am logged on, appdemo/administrator. I'm going to select this user. If I wished, I could impersonate another user. So we're going to select appdemo administrator, select OK. And this is now going to attempt to form the communication via the SQL server and the IIS server to connect the two components together via the management console. At this stage here, we have success. If the icons now appear in colors, then we have success. So that's the management server connection all done successfully. So we can close out of this. And now we need to do a similar operation for the Environment Manager Personalization server. So we can go in now, and again we go into the AppSense section, Environment Manager, and we have the Personalization Server Configuration tool. This follows the exact same procedures that we had for the Management Center configuration utility. So again, exactly the same types of screens. So again, we hit next. We may get some slightly different prerequisites or missing parts that on variants. And again, here we have Windows Foundation is a very typical one that we see quite a lot of the time. And again, it's a matter of going in and repairing all. Here we can see that it's operated successfully. So if we hit the refresh button, all of the variances have disappeared, which means now we can close out. And we can continue with the configuration of the personalization server. Green ticks across the board. And again, exactly the same as previously. We will use a default website. Again, it will just create a separate slice on the website, a separate set of web pages for the personalization server. And again, we're using the same server for the management console and for the personalization server. In a real world live environment, you would split these two servers apart from each other and you configure them individually. If you wish to add more personalization servers in for load balancing or redundancy, then you would just run this configuration tool and the individual console MSI on each of those servers. So again, we're going to go Windows Authentication, and again we need the server name. And again, we're going to use the same service account. And you could, if you wish, to use different service accounts. And again, it's going to go through the process of installing the web interfaces, setting the connections up, applying the SQL schema, and connecting both ends. And we see the setup is completed. We're just waiting for the finish button to become active, and there it is. So we can just click finish. And again, what we'll do now is we'll come in and we will create a link to the Environment Manager console, and we will check that the communication to the personalization server has worked successfully. To do that, just run the console, and again we should get a splash screen with the version number of the software that we're using, and we will go down to user personalization and select the tab. We get a warning box. We will talk about that in further demos, and we will connect to the personalization server. Sometimes you will get a blank list. So all we need to do in here is add in your personalization server. So we'll give it a friendly name. And again, this is your personalization server. Remember here that we are using the same machine, the domain controller for the AppSense server management and personalization server. Select and we will connect. And again, we're using pass-through Windows authentication. And we should get the contacting personalization dialog box appear while it establishes communication. And here we can see that we've managed to communicate through to the personalization server. We have database information, version numbers and size of database. Therefore everything has been successful. So we can close out of the control panel, out of the console there. And the final one we need to do is the Performance Manager statistic database. So again, we'll just go into Performance Manager, and there is a tool here for the Performance Manager console. Application Manager does not have a server configuration utility. It's just the Management Center, Environment Manager, and Performance Manager. So again, we'll just run through exactly the same, and you can see the orange splash screen for Performance Manager 8.1 here. How can we can see now that we've got exactly the same type of dialog wizard? So we'll just run for the configuration utility again on here. This time we have no variances, so we can just move straight ahead and configure the Performance Manager Statistics server. And again, we use the same default website. It'll create a separate website under separate web pages underneath there. Windows authentication. And again, exactly the same as before. So we'll go for Windows authentication. Select our service account, put our password in, and let the installation and configuration process happen. Setup is complete, just waiting for the finish button to come through, and we have it there. So again, what we'll do is we'll create a few hyperlinks here. So we'll actually pick up Application Manager because we'll end up using that about. And we will also go in and get the Performance Manager console. And we will check that the communication to the Performance Manager Statistics engine is working. So to do that, we'll launch the console. So here we have the splash screen for the Performance Manager console. You'll notice that each of the major components of AppSense have their own consoles. So here we have the Performance Manager console. So we're going to go into statistical reports at the bottom, and again we will talk about these consoles in later masterclasses. So again we will go into statistics report and we will connect to the database. To do this then we hit the connect, and again at this stage we have no database, so we just need to prompt it. And connect through to the database. And if we see our items being highlighted up the top here, period, days, etc., that we can start to browse up and down, then we have got connection to the database. So everything's fine there. So we can close out of there. So just to sum up, what we've done is that we've tested the communications between the servers, and then we've run the software configuration utilities for the management console, for the environment manager, and for the performance manager as well. To do that, we have created an AppSense service account underneath Active Directory as a domain admin, and we've used that for Windows pass-through, authentication, and this guy here is a member of the domain admins as well as the domain users, and that's the account we use to create. At any time that you want to reconfigure any of these configuration utilities, these consoles, And all you would need to do is select the relevant one, for example, the Management Center Configuration Server tool. Select it, and you'll notice the next time it launches, it does not launch in the wizard mode. It will actually launch in a GUI mode to allow you to make individual changes to the elements that you require to be changed. So on screen now we can see that the Management Center configuration utility has launched, and we can now start to browse through the properties of the connection details. So if we have a look through, for example, we can go and have a look at the database. So if we select the database, and this is doing live queries against the configuration. And here we can see the database, etc., how it's been set up, and we can go into accounts and we can add, remove, set the properties, change passwords of the accounts. At any time that you actually want to go back and run through the wizard interface, then if we select up at the top, we can, if we wish, rerun the wizard, and then the wizard will fire back up and it takes us back through exactly the same procedures as we had before. So that's the end of Masterclass 2 concerning the configuration of the AppSense servers, testing, making sure that the consoles are up and running.